The summer garden party was my mother's annual show of superiority. White linen tablecloths stretched across tables under blooming magnolia trees, crystal glasses caught the afternoon light, and 75 relatives mingled on the perfectly manicured lawn of the house I'd been secretly paying for since 2019. Nobody knew that part. My daughter Emma sat beside me, her 8-year-old face bright with excitement. She'd chosen her favorite yellow dress that morning, the one with sunflowers embroidered along the hem. My son David, 16 and perpetually observant, sat across from us, already looking uncomfortable in his button-down shirt. "This is so pretty, Mom," Emma whispered, reaching for a cucumber sandwich from the tiered serving platter. Before her small fingers could grasp it, my mother's hand shot out and snatched the plate away entirely. "Adopted children eat in the kitchen," my mother announced, her voice cutting through the pleasant conversation around us. "We have standards at this table." The immediate vicinity went silent. Forks paused midair. Aunt Linda's glass stopped halfway to her lips. Emma's hand remained extended, hovering over empty space where the plate had been seconds before. My daughter looked at her empty hands, then at me, confusion clouding her dark eyes. She didn't cry. Emma rarely cried. She'd learned early that tears didn't change cruelty, they only fed it. I reached for my water glass, took a slow sip and said nothing. My hands didn't shake. They never did anymore. "Margaret, don't you think that's a bit harsh?" Uncle Tom ventured carefully from the end of the table. "Harsh?" My mother turned to him with practiced indignation. "I'm teaching appropriate boundaries. This girl needs to understand her place in this family. She's not blood." David's jaw tightened. I caught his eye and gave the smallest shake of my head. "Not yet." My mother continued, emboldened by the audience. "Do you know how much this party costs? How much this entire estate costs to maintain? I can't have every random child thinking they're entitled to the same treatment as real family members." "She's 8 years old," my sister Claire said quietly from her seat. "And she needs to learn," my mother snapped back. "Unlike some people, I don't pretend blood doesn't matter. Jennifer here made her choices. She adopted some stranger's child instead of giving me proper biological grandchildren. Well, actions have consequences." Emma's shoulders curled inward slightly. That small collapse of her posture did something to my carefully maintained composure, but I held it together. I'd learned to hold everything together. "Mom," I said calmly, "Emma is your granddaughter." "Don't insult my intelligence," she replied, gesturing dismissively. "I know what adoption means. It means you were too selfish to have real children. Too focused on your little nonprofit job that barely pays anything. Living in that tiny apartment, depending on family generosity for everything." The tiny apartment she thought I lived in was actually a property I'd purchased as an investment. I rented it to young professionals and stayed there occasionally to maintain the illusion. My actual home was a 4-bedroom house across town that nobody in my family had ever visited. "Grandma," David said, his voice tight, "you should stop." "I'll speak how I want in my own home," my mother declared, warming to her theme. "I've worked hard for everything I have. I raised 3 children in this house. I maintained property values in this neighborhood for 35 years. I don't need lectures from a 16-year-old about how to run my household." Her household. The irony was exquisite. David looked at me. I could see the question in his eyes, the same question he'd been asking for 2 years since he'd accidentally found the documents. "When are you going to tell them?" I'd always said not yet. The time wasn't right. But watching Emma's small hands clasped together in her lap, watching her try to disappear at a family gathering that should have welcomed her, something shifted. I gave David the slightest nod. He stood up so abruptly his chair scraped against the stone patio. The sound cut through the murmured conversations that had resumed around us. "Grandma," he said, his young voice carrying across the garden, "should I tell everyone who really paid for this house?" The color drained from my mother's face so quickly I thought she might faint. Around us, conversations stuttered to a halt. 75 relatives turned to watch. "David, sit down," my mother said, but her voice had lost its certainty. "No," he replied. "You just humiliated my sister at your party. In your house. Except it's not actually your house anymore, is it?" "I don't know what you think you know," my mother started. "I know that Mom has been paying your mortgage since Dad died," David continued. His hands were shaking but his voice stayed steady. I know that you were 3 months away from foreclosure in 2019. I know that Mom refinanced this entire property under her name to save it. Uncle Tom set down his fork. Aunt Linda's mouth had fallen open. My sister Claire was staring at me with wide eyes. That's not, you're confused, my mother stammered. I'm not confused, David said. I found the documents last year when I was looking for my birth certificate. Mom keeps everything organized in labeled files. Property deeds, mortgage statements, payment records. All of it. My mother's face had gone from white to red. Jennifer, tell him he's mistaken. I took another sip of water. He's not mistaken. The garden was so quiet I could hear the fountain 3 yards away, the gentle splash of water over stone. When Dad died, I said calmly, addressing the table, he left significant debts nobody knew about. Medical bills from treatments insurance didn't cover. Business loans he'd personally guaranteed. Mom was facing foreclosure within months. You told us you had it handled, Claire said to our mother. I did handle it, my mother snapped, but her authority was crumbling. You called me, I corrected. You called me crying at 2 a.m, begging for help. You said you'd lose everything. You said Dad's memory would be destroyed if people knew he'd left you in debt. Uncle Tom leaned forward. How much debt? $473,000, I said. Medical bills, business loans, and 18 months of missed mortgage payments with penalties. Aunt Linda gasped. How did your nonprofit job? I don't work at a nonprofit, I said. I own one. I'm the founder and director of Riverside Community Foundation. We manage assets worth approximately $200 million. My annual salary is $280,000. I also consult for 3 other charitable organizations. My total annual income is around $450,000. The silence was absolute. That's not possible, my mother whispered. You live in that tiny apartment. You drive that old car. You never have money when we go out. The apartment is an investment property I rent out, I explained. I stay there when I visit to avoid questions. The car is 12 years old because it runs perfectly and I don't care about impressing people. And I never have money when we go out because I'm tired of paying for everyone's meals while being told I'm the family failure. But you always said, Claire started. I never said anything, I interrupted. You all assumed. When I started the foundation 8 years ago, I tried to tell you. Mom interrupted to explain how charities don't make money. Dad changed the subject to talk about proper careers. I stopped trying to correct you. My mother was gripping the edge of the table. The house is in my name, I confirmed. When you called that night, I paid off all of Dad's debts. I refinanced the mortgage, made you the primary resident, and I've been paying it ever since. $4,200 every month for 7 years. Plus property taxes. Plus the major repairs you thought insurance covered. Why would you do that? Uncle Tom asked. Because she's my mother, I said simply. Because this was my childhood home. Because despite everything, I didn't want to see her homeless. Despite everything, my mother repeated, and I heard the threat in her voice, the old instinct to control the narrative. Despite being told my entire life that I was the disappointment, I said, my voice still calm. Despite Dad telling me business school was wasted on a daughter. Despite you telling everyone I was barely scraping by while I was actually building something meaningful. Emma's small voice cut through the tension. You own Grandma's house? I looked at my daughter, at her confused, hurt face. Yes, sweetheart. I own this house. And you are my daughter, which means you have every right to be here. More right than almost anyone at this table. David sat back down, his job done. He reached across and squeezed Emma's hand. Jennifer, my mother said, trying to reassemble her authority, we can discuss this privately. No, I said. We're discussing it now. In front of everyone. Because you just told my 8-year-old daughter she's not good enough to eat at your table. At a table I own. In a house I pay for. Aunt Linda's husband, Richard, spoke up from the far end. So what happens now? Now, I said, pulling my phone from my purse. We make some changes. I opened my email and began typing, my fingers steady on the screen. I'm emailing my property manager and my attorney. Effective immediately, the residents at 847 Maple Grove will have new occupancy terms. You can't, my mother started. I can, I said, still typing. It's my property. You're listed as primary resident, not owner. That's a revocable arrangement. Where would I go? The fear in her voice was real now. I'm not evicting you, I said, finishing the email and looking up. But there will be changes. First, Emma is welcome in every room of this house. Every chair, every table, every space. If she's not welcome, then nobody is. Emma was watching me with wide eyes. Second, I continued, the narrative changes today. I'm done being the family disappointment. You want to live in this house I bought? Then you acknowledge reality. I'm successful. My work matters. And my daughter, both my children, are your grandchildren without qualification. My mother's hands were shaking. You'd really throw me out over this? You really just told an 8-year-old child she had to eat in the kitchen because she's adopted, I replied. At a party I'm ultimately paying for. Yes, I'd really do this. Claire found her voice. How long has it been? Since you paid off everything. 7 years, I said. I closed on the refinance in September 2019. And you never told anyone, Uncle Tom said slowly. You just let us all think. That I was struggling, I finished. Yes. Because it was easier than fighting about it. Because every time I tried to share good news, someone explained why it wasn't that impressive. So I stopped sharing. Richard shook his head. That's over $400,000 you've paid. Just in mortgage payments. $428,000 in mortgage payments, I corrected. Roughly another $180,000 in property taxes, insurance and major repairs. The roof in 2021, the HVAC system last year, the foundation work. My mother had tears running down her face now, but they didn't move me the way they might have years ago. I'd seen her cry before, usually when she wanted something. I've been grateful, she whispered. I just didn't know. You did know, I said quietly. You knew I was paying for everything. You chose to believe I was somehow doing it while barely surviving, because that fit your narrative better than admitting your daughter had succeeded. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Can we go home? In a minute, baby, I said, stroking her hair. First, Grandma needs to apologize to you. My mother looked up, mascara streaking her cheeks. She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked at Emma's small face. I'm sorry, she said, and for the first time she sounded like she might mean it. That was cruel. You didn't deserve that. Emma nodded silently, still pressed against my side. I stood up, gathering my purse. David and Emma stood with me. We're leaving now. The party can continue. I'll have my attorney send over the updated residency agreement next week. Read it carefully, Mom. As we walked through the garden toward the front driveway, I heard the explosion of conversation behind us. 75 relatives all trying to process what they'd just learned. David opened the car door for Emma, then slid into the front seat. As I started the engine, he said quietly, "That was intense." "That was necessary," I replied. "Are you really going to make her sign new papers?" Emma asked from the back seat. "Yes," I said. "Not to be cruel. But boundaries matter. And you matter, Emma. You matter more than pretending everything is fine." In the rearview mirror, I saw Emma nod, her face thoughtful. As we pulled away from the house I owned, the house my mother thought was her throne, I felt something I hadn't felt in years at a family gathering. Peace. My phone started buzzing before we reached the end of the street. Claire's name flashed on the screen. Then Uncle Tom. Then Aunt Linda. I turned the phone face down and kept driving. They could wait. For 7 years I'd waited while they assumed, judged, and dismissed. While they built their comfortable narratives about my failure and their superiority. They could wait a few hours to hear the truth they should have asked about years ago. Beside me, David turned on the radio. Behind me, Emma hummed along to a song she recognized. And I drove us home, to the house nobody knew about, where my daughter could eat at any table she wanted.